If you can't win the war, spin the war. As Donald Trump continues to lose the war against a very real coronavirus, still failing to provide mass testing, coordinated containment, or adequate stimulus money, he and the right wing have decided to turn to the fake war happening in their heads that they can win. The culture war. You know, the one against paper straws, pronouns, Starbucks cups that say happy holidays, and women. Conservative and extremist groups behind the protests to stop shelter-in-place laws are pushing the argument that the US should allow COVID-19 to run its so-called course and kill tens of thousands more people because liberty. And that's not just incredibly stupid, it's advocating for something far more sinister and, yes, very racist. Just when you thought Trumpism couldn't get any more toxic, an infectious pandemic has proved you totally wrong.
No more tyranny! No more tyranny! USA! USA! USA!
Bill Gates is a psychopath. Bill Gates wants to kill us all. Bill Gates wants us to have a mandatory vaccine. Bill Gates wants us all microchipped.
Yes! Okay, we get it. You're a Mac guy. The protests against coronavirus restrictions are the Serengeti of right-wing conspiracy Kool-Aid. Everyone's come to drink. You've got the anti-vaxxers with calls to fire Dr. Fauci, the 5G freaks, the QAnon whack jobs, the gun fanatics, the Alex Jones followers juiced on supplements, the Proud Boys flashing white power signs, and just in case it wasn't clear enough, this unbelievable urchin. Look, in some ways, I get their frustrations with wanting to go back to work. I mean, look at them. Hordes of people nobody wants to be stuck at home with. These are the housemates who with the door open and think a chore wheel is unconstitutional. And uniting them all is a man famous for public defecation, Donald Trump. Trump, despite punting the responsibility of the coronavirus response to governors, has been simultaneously encouraging protests against stay-at-home ordinances through Twitter and his press conferences.
If people feel that way, you're allowed to protest. Some have gone too far. Some governors have gone too far. Some of the things that happened are maybe not so appropriate.
The scary part about these protests isn't just the white nationalists, it's that they're being inflated and promoted by Fox News and powerful conservative lawmakers and organizations. The Michigan protest was a joint effort between the Michigan Conservative Coalition, founded by state Republican Matt Maddock, and the Michigan Freedom Fund, which has gotten at least $500,000 from the Blonde Angels of Death, also known as the DeVos family. In Idaho, protests were promoted by the Idaho Freedom Foundation that receives donations from dark money groups funded by right-wing billionaires like the Koch brothers. And unlike protests from, say, grocery store workers or tenants' rights groups or immigrant rights groups, the ones actually trying to help people, these demonstrations are not grassroots. Instead, they're the love child of the Koch brothers created Tea Party movement and Unite the Right, who, of course, were brother and sister to begin with, which explains this guy. This is weaponized Trumpism. Each MAGA-hatted ghoul is now their own biological weapon, and they believe that their right to spread coronavirus through their infected spittle while chanting USA is protected by the Second Amendment. From my cold, unwashed hands. But there is a line that many of the demonstrators have been parroting that's more ominous than the rest.
People are gonna die. They die no matter what.
Unfortunately, people die. That's called living. We're not gonna make it out alive.
It's the flu. The people who have poor health are always the most vulnerable. God bless them. But we have to get back to work because the rest of us matter too.
Thank you, Karen, for all lives mattering the coronavirus. Here's the thing though, asymptomatic people can spread coronavirus too. The mental gymnastics these people are doing is remarkable. All I'm saying is maybe the real victims are the perpetrators. The idea that we should simply allow coronavirus to kill whoever it happens to kill is an idea that has been explicitly articulated in private by the president, according to many reports. And he's even had the sociopathic gall to say it publicly.
Some of the doctors say it will wash through, it will flow through. I say it washes through. Other people don't like that term, but where it washes through. That was always an alternative. That's what I said. Let it rip, let it ride. Do nothing.
Let it rip, let it ride? That's not how to talk about a massive loss of life. But coincidentally, that has been my policy on farting while sheltering in place. Legumes and nightshades do it to me every time. I just like to say nightshades. And of course, just like the guy who ate hydroxychloroquine and died, or the bar owner who went on a cruise and died, people are listening to the bad advice of this president, like those still crowding onto the beaches of Florida.
What some people told me when I was talking to the college students, a couple of them said the exact same things that President Trump recently said, that they felt that this would wash over, that they felt this was like the flu.
Oh, great. Now is when college kids are listening to authority? Trump is like a deadbeat dad who shows up once a year with a six-pack like, don't listen to your mother, all right? Drinking and driving can be fun. Okay, let's imagine that Trump's sadistic fascination is correct, that the best way to get rid of the virus is to let it run its course. We never sheltered in place, and we continued to work and went to malls and bars and beaches. The public research university Imperial College in London ran a simulation based on numbers in other countries and concluded that if the US did nothing, 80% of Americans would get the disease, 2.2 million Americans would die from the virus itself, specifically between 4 and 8% of all Americans over the age of 70. 2.2 million. For some comparison, that's more deaths than the casualties from every war in American history combined. But the real question isn't how many people will die if we go about business as usual, it's who will die. And we don't need a simulation to know the answer. In New York City, the epicenter of COVID-19, the virus is twice as deadly for blacks and Latinos than it is for whites. In states like Wisconsin and Kansas, where only 6% of the population is black people make up 40 and 30% of the coronavirus deaths, respectively. In Michigan, where protesters staged Operation Gridlock, only 14% of the population is black. And yet, black Michiganders are 33% of the coronavirus cases and 40% of deaths. State after state, city after city, the stark patterns are the same. Why? Well, that's for many other Newsbroke videos, but off the top of my head, lack of health insurance and treatment for underlying health conditions, environmental racism that puts polluting industries next to black communities, which can lead to underlying conditions like asthma forming in the first place, food deserts that make it hard to eat healthy, the fact that black people are often not believed by healthcare providers when they say are in pain, poverty, Jim Crow, and 250 years of slavery. Other than that, I can't imagine why. 5G? And people of color, in addition to women, are also more likely to be essential workers.
People like Detroit bus driver Jason Hargrove, an essential worker who posted this video seen by millions on Facebook, complaining about a sick passenger who he felt should never have walked out of her home.
It was about a good 8-9 people on the bus, and she stood there and coughed. That lets me know that some folks don't care.
He was a married father of 6, and he died of COVID-19 just 11 days later.
Now let's check in with the makeup of the anti-quarantine protest, shall we? White, 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 white. Oh, and here's a guy in San Diego holding a sign that says, "Let my people golf." The only way that could be whiter is if he went home and gave the protest a 1-star Yelp review, which it deserved. What these protesters are implicitly saying is they don't mind people dying so long as they don't look like them. So it's no wonder that white supremacists are flocking to these demonstrations because, in effect, the argument to just let people die is one of pandemic eugenics. Letting the vulnerable, minorities, the elderly, and the disabled die is essentially part of an ideology that believes that the coronavirus is just nature's way of killing off the weak links in the gene pool. It's social Darwinism and survival of the fittest at its grossest, especially when these protesters aren't exactly the fittest. Look, I'm not saying that they aren't hurting too. The small business loans, stimulus checks, and unemployment benefits are not enough. But instead of joining those who are demanding a bailout of people and not corporations, these protesters are being further radicalized by right-wing media, lawmakers, and, as always, Facebook. If we go on with our lives or go back to normalcy without a real public health solution, we're effectively saying that the people who are arguably doing the most to keep us healthy and fed and receiving our packages with shiny new sweatpants to wear to the living room, you know, the ones who are helping maintain the last semblance of normalcy we have, they should be the ones to die. And that is some racist bullshit that should always live under quarantine.
Hey everyone, Matt Lieb here. I've been producing and writing jokes for Newsbroke, and we're so glad that you're here to watch all of our quarantine special, Helter Shelter. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribe to AJ Plus. And, thanks so much for watching. We've been stuck together for like weeks, it feels like years now, but it's been really nice.
Do you guys hear something?